Hi, my name is Craig Shield, and this is my capstone presentation on positive outcomes of mandatory use of body cameras for law enforcement. Today, this discussion will cover 4 different topics, from officer accessibility, or accountability and transparency, officer safety, the training that these cameras can provide officers, and the relationship in the communities that it can provide. The first topic will be the accountability and transparency of officers. Studies show that these complaints when use of body cameras can go down by as much as 35%, and the complaints on the use of force can be down as low as 14%. There's a study that shows by the Rialto Police Department that the use of force complaints can go down by as much as 50%. The use of these body cameras can increase the transparency to the public and help police in many different situations. There have been many situations in the last several years where the use of force by the officers have been questioned, and the use of these body cameras can provide another tool to provide a view of what happened in those scenarios. When an officer is involved with a citizen, the way that the officer speaks to the citizen, the way the citizen speaks to the officer, can also be affected by the use of these cameras. These cameras can pick up every conversation, and as long as they're in focus and in the right area, can provide a lot of information that may or may not have been able to be provided by not using them. The use of the body cameras has also reduced the amount of arrests by 18% when used in studies. In Mesa, Arizona, they did a 10-month study involving 100 officers over 10 months, and the use of cameras reduced the stops and frisks by and increase the amount of citations that were issued and warnings that were issued, rather than people being arrested and taken to jail and assaulted by the officers and having any confrontation between the officers and the citizens. The use of these body cameras can fill in the blanks of many different things that have been missing. By the use of these cameras, the citizens now have smartphones, and the use of these smartphones turn on when the citizens want them to turn on. By the use of the body cameras, it can be something that's recorded start to finish from the officers and help the officers present information from what they saw from their point of view. These cameras are mounted to the officers either on their body or on their sunglasses, and it gives the point of view of what the officer saw during the encounter. The next topic will be officer safety. The use of the body camera can provide many different effects in officer safety. The use of the body camera to protect the officer's safety by deterring antagonistic behavior by both the officer and the citizen that's involved in the topic of discussion or in this traffic stop. When the officer's talking to one of the citizens, the way they behave, it's there's been many of studies that show that when you know you're being recorded, people act differently. There are people that would say things and do things to officers that they wouldn't do if they know they're being recorded and being watched, and this can be used at a later date against them. The behavior of people change drastically when they know they're being watched and know they're being recorded, and that the information can be used against them later on. It's much more likely that they're going to be respectful and understand what the officer is saying and more comprehensive, and this in general will lower the amount of confrontations that officers have between them and the citizens. The use of a body camera can also give the officer peace of mind to know that anything that they say is recorded, and that if there's any claims against them, there's been many times where people have said they've been harassed by an officer or abused by an officer or something to that effect, and the use of these body cameras can help offset that or deter that in many different ways. I believe that the use of these cameras will also deter people from making those false claims and reduce the number of complaints against officers, because they know they cannot go and produce these claims knowing they're not true, knowing that they were recorded, and that their claims will be thrown out because of the use of these body cameras. The most important use, I believe, in these cameras is the use of training. These cameras can be used to record situations that were involved and that officers have dealt with, and be used for training of not only current officers, but for future officers and officers that are being trained from the start. These situations can be recorded and played for these officers and stopped, and these officers can be asked what they would do in those situations. These type of training tools will help officers know the response and know what's expected of them when they get in these situations. There have been many situations where officers have probably never seen and never been in those situations, and the first time that you're in those situations, you'll act differently if you don't know and haven't been through them. So the use of these cameras and recordings can produce training and abilities to see these scenarios, and before they're involved on the street. It's much easier to involve in a classroom and go through and tweak what the response would be and what the reactions would be, and if the reactions are wrong, then they can go and change those and train the officers to where the actions would be more acceptable and a better, different way of reducing the amount of force being used. The excessive use of force has been something that has been a hot topic for the last several years, and there have been several cases where there's been complaints of overuse of force and officers that are reacting to these situations incorrectly, and these use of training tools and the ability to show them these situations can prevent that. These situations also cause massive protests and massive looting and violence that happens inside of cities, and also puts officers in danger, to where I believe if the use of these body cameras reduces the amounts of these events, all the protests and all the violence and the looting and the weeks on end of violence can also reduce the amount of safeties and securities of officers and the citizens around the community. There's been many people that have been hurt and injured in these riots, and all this can be eliminated if the relationship between the police and the community is solved. Which leads me to the next topic of how we can change the relationship between the community and the officers. The complaint right now and for the last several years has been that the police department is non-transparent, and the relationships between the police and the community have suffered. In the past, there's been many times where the officers were out and about foot patrols and in the community, and the relationship between the police and the community was much better. With the things that have happened in the past, the relationship between the community and the police have deterred, and those interactions between police and the community are less and less. With the use of body cameras and the community knowing that these body cameras are mandatory and they're going to be in use on all officers, it will help for the police department to show that they are transparent and that what their actions are public knowledge, and that these recordings will be released as soon as the footage has been viewed and can be released. The main concern or problems that the community has is they feel that the officers can access the footage and change the footage and alter the footage to where it benefits them, and that's not the case. The officers have no way of accessing the footage. Only supervisors and above can have access to the footage and view the footage. Once the footage is recorded and the officer docks the camera, then the camera downloads the information and it's viewed by supervisors and officers above them. The use of the body cameras in high areas such as Los Angeles, New York, Dallas, these high traffic, high populated areas should be the first ones to start with these cameras and use them, because their interactions with the public, the general public, are much more on a daily basis and much more involved. The Los Angeles, New York, Las Vegas all have foot patrols that go to the downtowns and interact with different people, and on a daily basis the use of these cameras can really go a long way to helping the relationship rebuild through the community and through law enforcement involvement. I believe that the use of these cameras over time can rebuild the reputation of the police and show the community that all actions by the police towards the citizens are not just the police want violence or support violence. The violence against citizens is not something that the police want. The police safety and security and to be able to go home every night to their families is the top priority of all law enforcement departments, and the community should want the same thing. The use of these body cameras and the ability to use them as a tool to help officer safety, to help train officers, to help rebuild the community, and to hold the officers accountable are all reasons that these body cameras should be mandatory and would help to be mandatory. This completes my presentation. Thank you and good night.